Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us as we continue the conversation on bending the arc of youth potential. My name is Darienne Hudson, and I'm a proud educator. I'm currently the president and CEO of the United Way for Southeastern Michigan and formerly served as the superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools. Like many of you, I've worked to address the inequities and limitations of our current K-12 system, which is at a critical crossroads. We are living through two pandemics in this country: the coronavirus and systemic racism. Our conversation today is focused on disruption and innovation as the pandemic has upended education as we know it. The future path we choose will redefine student learning, parent engagement, public and private partnerships, and educational leadership for generations to come. We have two choices: to create a more equitable, personalized, digitally advanced learning system, or to resort back to the model of old. Which path will we choose? Well, today we have four phenomenal educational leaders who will offer their perspectives on these challenges and opportunities and the ways in which we can accelerate student learning. So I'm pleased to welcome to our panel today, Kaya Henderson, founder and CEO of Reconstruction; Constance C.J. Jones, CEO of the Noble Network of Charter Schools in Chicago; Phyllis Lockett, founder and CEO of Leap Innovations; and Pedro Martinez, superintendent of the San Antonio Independent School District. All of our panelists serve the K-12 system in various capacities. So I'll ask each of you to share your perspectives on the following question. Pedro, I'll start with you. What has the pandemic taught you as an urban superintendent about the limitations of our K-12 education system to serve students outside of its traditional structure, and what are the implications for leadership?
Thank you, Darienne. So first of all, I have so much respect for all of my colleagues that are trying to navigate this pandemic. Nobody has a map. And one of the things that we have seen here in San Antonio, we already had a digital divide, but this pandemic just really showed us how big it was. We had neighborhoods where more than 70% of the families did not have devices, did not have internet access. The infrastructure wasn't even in the ground for them to have any kind of stability, even for those who had internet access. And so a couple of things we've learned. So first of all, many of our families right now, they're just struggling. Most of my parents have lost their jobs or have lost hours. So they're just trying to navigate just a financial situation. We have focused a lot on just making sure that we're checking in on the social and emotional health of our children. We are seeing, some of the things that scares us the most. We're seeing more domestic violence. We're seeing more incidents of children being exposed to stress. But the other thing we've also learned, though, is that, our teachers have just stepped up. I mean, they have really seen themselves as the lifelines to these children. And we saw it in spring break. And now that we've amped up the rigor for the instruction with the new school year, I'm seeing all of our teachers really working hard to step up to be that lifeline for our children. And I believe that our community is seeing it. Our community is seeing that schools are more essential than ever, not just for academics, but for so many other non-academic needs, including nutrition, of course, technology, as well as social and emotional support for both the children and, frankly, for the parents as well.
I'm grateful to hear that. Moving on, CJ, I'll go to you, as CEO of a charter network. What are the limitations that you see, and what is emerging, as Pedro had mentioned, from the staff in your network?
Thank you, Darienne, for facilitating this conversation today. And Pedro definitely hit on a lot of things that we have experienced here in Chicago. I have the privilege of serving over 12,500 students across 18 campuses here in Chicago, primarily located in the south and west sides of the city. And I can tell you for sure, Noble is known and has traditionally been known for its incredible results related to academic growth and college matriculation. And at the same time, we got those results through what our peers would describe as a traditional brick and mortar teaching model. And so, of course, when we transitioned to this remote learning context, we really had to hustle to adjust to that environment. As Pedro mentioned, just the infrastructure, not having, our students not having access to Chromebooks and technology and Wi-Fi was something that we had to really rally to solve. And I'm really grateful for our team of teachers and others who made that possible. But from a charter perspective, one of the things that has always been true, but I think has really hit home with many charter networks across the country, we've often tried to see ourselves as just an education institution, and that is wrong. When we are doing our best work in service to our communities, we are a community institution. So it has been an honor, truly, to serve our students, our community, through providing food for our families and all families across Chicago. We started a fund to help provide assistance and support for rent, for bill pay, and for additional services that our students need. Like I often say to our folks, when we sign up for this work, we sign up for all of it. And that statement is elevated and heightened in the midst of a pandemic when our families are depending on us for so much. And we have a responsibility to serve them and be there for them during this time.
Thank you for reminding us about the importance of community. So Kaya, I'm going to go to you now. I'm just very interested in your perspective. You've been an urban superintendent. You've always focused on human capital as one of the main levers for driving change. So what do you see as limitations and opportunities?
Thanks. I think there have been some pretty interesting limitations, and I want to pick right up on CJ's focus on community. I think what I have learned over my career is that big problems get solved when everybody in the community comes together and co-create solutions. And what I've seen too little of, frankly, is schools and school districts working with parents and working with community members to jointly figure out solutions. I think the onus has been placed on schools and school districts to figure it out and deliver something to families, when in fact the most successful places that we're seeing are places that deeply engage with their teachers, deeply engage with their families and with their students to ask, what do you want? How do we solve this? And we're able to be nimble and think out of the box. I think one of the other limitations that I've seen, frankly, given my experience with human capital is I saw the pitting of teachers versus students, right? Teachers' health versus what students need, and students needing to come back to school, parents needing a place for their kids to go. And I think that we have to think differently about some of our union contracts that literally stymied some districts from being able to serve students in the way that they needed to. And so I think we have to get a little bit more creative with some of our policies and with some of our contracts to allow schools to be nimble in new ways. I think the final limitation that I think we're all seeing and feeling very deeply is the lack of attention to children's well-being. We want kids to achieve academically, but kids can't achieve academically when they are traumatized, when, logging onto Zoom is a real problem for them, when we aren't recognizing that they haven't seen their friends and we just aren't attending to who they are as people. And I don't think we've given schools and school districts enough latitude to think about how that works. And so seeing presentations like the one right before us on social and emotional learning and figuring out how we maximize those things, I think are really important, newly important or differently important as a result of the pandemic.
Right. So Phyllis, building on that, innovation and creativity, thinking outside of the box is at the heart of the work that you do. So what observations have you seen? What can you share with us about what you see as limitations and some implications for leaders?
Yes, thank you. And it's such an honor to be on this panel, and much homage to those who are on the front line dealing with this incredible moment. CJ and Pedro, you've got my utmost respect. At LEAP, we've been thinking about this for a while. How do we reimagine learning to enable more personalization and agency building skills and connected learning opportunities for students, digital fluency to leverage and augment the learning experience. And if that was not a priority before COVID, it is absolutely a priority now. I think the shift of what we've seen happen is that we were just not prepared. we were not prepared to pivot. And while you see almost every other sector across America that was ready or at least had the resources and the skill sets and to make adjustment, our education system has not kept pace. And that's been the hardest part. I think where we see schools and organizations that have been really focused on those core skill sets of building agency and ownership of students, really addressing the social and emotional learning needs of students, helping them learn across multiple modalities, giving our educators the resources and skills to navigate across multiple modalities. We have seen in a number of the school models that we've been supporting over the last 6 years, more agility and flexibility to sustain themselves in this context. And I think the question that we've been asking is we need to take this moment to rethink and reimagine what the K-12 education system is, who is it designed for, and what does it need to look like to keep pace with the demands of what the digital economy requires.
Thank you for all of those perspectives. And all of you are talking about equity and lack of access and inequities that exist in the system. So this next question really focuses on what COVID-19 has revealed for us during this time. COVID-19 has revealed the fault lines of inequity that have long plagued our educational system, and it has had a profound effect on children and families. So CJ, my question for you is, how are the children? How do we build a system that is designed to better meet their needs given the inequities that we've seen at the current time?
Yes, it's a great question. And first, I cannot emphasize enough that first we have to be truly reflective of ourselves and our practices and our systems and our beliefs. We have to really interrogate that in order to do what's best for our kids. And so the reason why I say that is because, there are a lot of organizations out here who have touted like these incredible results, and that's great. And it is not to downplay those results, because those results take a lot of hard work and intentionality of many to get there. But one of the things that we learned throughout this past year of reflection, we completed the strategic plan process, and our whole 5-year plan is focused on equity and equitable outcomes and positive student experiences based on what our people were telling us. Every inequity that we saw during that process has just been heightened and exacerbated as a result of this pandemic. And we can't just no longer focus on the top line. We got to go really, really deep and understand the experiences of the people we serve. And so, just this morning, as I was going through my inbox for this fund we started to support our families in need, we are still 7 months into this pandemic, seeing lots of requests for food, for rent. Parents, essential workers, not just one, but both oftentimes out of work because of COVID. And I could tell you from COVID hitting my immediate family personally recently, this thing is hard to recover from. So it's not you're out for 2 weeks. You could be out for a month. You could be out for 2 months. This is what we're dealing with here. And so we have to figure out how do we bridge the gap? How do we provide support to our families? And we have to recognize the humanity of every single person that we serve, okay? That's the first start to this equity journey, okay? Is recognizing the humanity, the dignity, the identity, the unique cultural experiences, unique starting places of the people we serve. And then we can get to bridging these gaps and bridging these solutions. I will also say that, in these learnings, we have, made various commitments. We realize that we don't just need to be focusing on supporting families through providing resources just through COVID, but how do we expand that support? Because guess what, even after COVID, the need doesn't go away. We've committed to a 1-to-1 ratio, technology to a student. Every student that starts with us freshman year will get a Chromebook that they will keep throughout their tenure. And so we have to think about what is within our locus of control, but first starting off with what are the facts? What are the realities? Having the conversations. I've learned a lot from talking to my colleagues who have and other people who have, kids in other, school districts about some of the things and supports that they've been receiving. A lot of them been had, access to Chromebooks and, Chromebooks going home with their kids every single day. And it wasn't until this pandemic that I, as a leader, started to think about that. So it has truly been a lesson for us to learn and get better.
So you're mentioning a lot about the vulnerability of Black, Brown, and low-income communities. And Pedro, I wanted to ask you, from your perspective as a parent and an educator, how are children experiencing this pandemic, and what can we do differently to address their concerns?
Well, to build on what CJ just said, I think, one, there's been some great lessons for myself and our teachers. We were hoping to be a 101 district in 5 years, and we wanted to do it in a very methodical way. Well, we did it in 3 weeks. We implemented a learning management system in a matter of 2 months. And I got to tell you, our teachers, 3,200 of them, before their contract started, came in a week early to train themselves and work with our expert teachers to prepare 1 million lesson plans. And when I saw that, and when I think what they saw was, we always talked about the inequities in our community. In our city, we're one of multiple school districts, but we have about 80% of the poverty of the entire county. Even though we're only about 20% of the county, we have 80% of the poverty. And it's very visible in our district. And we talk about it a lot in our district, but I think when this pandemic hit and we saw where our teachers could see directly where our children lived, where they could actually hear in the background the fact that many of our children didn't have privacy. We had to buy headphones for every single child because we couldn't count on them being able to focus on their instruction when we started online in the spring. So these lessons, I think, have changed really the perspective of definitely our teachers, our staff, going forward. And as we look at how we're changing things, I just been heartened by just how much, and Kaya hit it. We've had issues with our union AFTs here in Texas. It looks a little different in Texas than other states, but they still have the same amount of pressure that they put on our board and our community, and they're very loud. And sometimes we go at odds, but I'll tell you, our teachers themselves have been dedicated to our children. And so I think right now, this is an opportunity for all of us. And we are putting pressure on the city. We are putting pressure on the county, because we're reminding them that, look, yes, we are serving, these children, and it's our honor to serve these children, but you had a hand in creating these conditions of this segregation. You had a hand on the fact that there wasn't enough economic development, not enough housing, support, not enough support on healthcare. And so guess what? Now all of us have to work together. And so we will do our part academically, but it's going to take everybody. And so, Darienne, I would say, one of the biggest things we're seeing is that it's going to take the entire community. And so we forced, for example, the city, they put up their CARE Act dollars to help us to provide routers to our children because hotspots weren't stable enough. The county is actually providing us resources that are matching resources so that every child not only has a Chromebook, but they also, at the younger grades, has an iPad. And they get to have it at home. They get to keep it as long as they're with us, and that'll be from pre-K all the way going forward. And so for us, again, the lessons we're learning right now is that the needs are great. But I think, Kaya, you said it best, and so did you, CJ. This is a time when, as leaders, we have to call people out. We have to call them out and say, has to be a community effort. And by the way, and my board president said this, it's not about going back to normal. Normal wasn't that great. It has to be better. It has to be better, and we have to continue to advocate. And I'll tell you, I am talking more about how do we make sure our parents have living wage jobs, because these individuals were already working 2 jobs, not able to make ends meet, and guess what? COVID hit them the most. So it's just been very cruel. And so again, I think this is a time for all of us as leaders to use our voices and to call things out, because again, if we don't, I don't know who else will.
So the digital divide is a theme today, and Phyllis, you're very familiar with the work that the ASU GSV Summit has been doing for years to be an advocate in the development of digital and non-digital solutions and innovations. Technology is a basic need, and if we haven't learned anything from COVID, it's that. It's the same way we talk about food and housing and transportation, we've got to talk about technology as well. So what innovations do you see that are having an impact on new learning approaches and a new learning paradigm, and what innovations are still needed?
Yeah, I'm so inspired by this moment, and just want to double click on, we cannot go back to normal, because normal was not good enough. But look at what this crisis is pushing us all to do, which is to innovate and reimagine, and that is exactly what the ASU GSB community has been doing for years. And as we think about and reflect on innovations that are needed, baseline, democratic right is absolutely access to internet and devices, and that should be just the baseline. But as I think about some of the newer innovations, in fact, I was honored with GSB last week to acknowledge the Lindsay Unified School District, who has put together an extraordinary innovation to connect the social and emotional learning needs of students to what their educators are doing to better tailor and personalize learning for their students. I think about a new solution that's coming out, Zoom education. You guys are gonna love it. We think about the challenges or the innovations that can be enhanced in a Zoom experience is around the corner, and it's gonna be phenomenal. I think there's gotta be, though, more engaging curriculum, more engaging and rigorous ed tech solutions to engage our students. We think about our students, first of all, who should not be on Zoom all day, but when you think about the kinds of solutions that are interesting and that will engage them, our kids will play games, right? They're computer games all day. How do we take some of those approaches, more practically and apply them in the curriculum and in the delivery for our educators and our students? And so I think there's some real opportunities. I see some exciting things coming, but there's still a lot more work to do. And I'm hoping that this, again, a call to action will ignite that for the ed tech community of ASU, GSB, and beyond.
So Kaya, you've recently launched a new learning solution. So what was the motivation behind that, and what do you believe is still needed in the space of innovation and learning?
So Reconstruction is actually a supplemental learning solution. It's an online platform that focuses on teaching and developing the cultural identity of African American young people. It's open to everybody, but it's a deep focus on Black history and Black excellence and what is not being taught in school that will help African American students see themselves differently in the world. And I think that building our young people's talents, their confidence, their agency, their responsibility is as important as building their academics. They go hand in hand. And one of the innovations that I'm seeing beyond what we're creating at Reconstruction is just the democratization of content development, right? Previously, all content was coming from the school or the school district or a handful of publishers. And now things are wide open and lots of people are able to create content, far more content, far different content than what has previously been available. I think you marry that with a new way of thinking about demand. Parents now are asking for very different things now that they've had a front row seat in what's happening in classrooms. And so I think that we are at the beginning of an era where you're going to see lots more content creation happening from lots more people. I think you're going to see parents and families choosing some things from their school and their school district, but other things from other places. And I think it's going to call us to reimagine even the role of school as provider. Maybe schools or educational institutions become places where after you've curated a set of experiences for your kids, you go and say, does this add up to a diploma or does this add up to a something? And so I think literally everything from who's creating content for kids to how it all fits together is up for grabs. And I think in these moments, the most innovating entrepreneurial people thrive. I think that's why we started this company. And so I'm excited for what might happen.
So staying with you, Kaya, for a moment, because you've observed educational systems from around the world. So what has inspired you? What can we learn to keep pushing the agenda here in the U.S.? And what, if If you could shape the national education agenda, what would you include in that agenda?
I'll take the what is inspiring for 100, Darienne. I think the most inspiring stuff that I'm seeing both in the US and around the world is, what Pedro said, teachers. Teachers are teachers are exceeding the occasion. I spend Sundays like literally scouring YouTube and watching these amazing, because now all of the teachers' work is kind of out for the public to see. And so you see these amazing teachers bringing learning alive in new ways. They are not limited by Zoom. They have costumes. They are doing all kinds of things. They're checking on kids' mental health. They are connecting with kids in different ways. They are turning these technologies that weren't created for this inside out and using them in new ways. And I see that from, literally people in Afghanistan who are using whiteboards and putting, problems up on the whiteboard, and literally kids using the side of their refrigerator to respond on their mom's cell phone, like literally in places that we don't have. I see people using radio and TV and just teachers going above and beyond to deliver what they are delivering to their kids. And I think that's the most inspiring thing going on right now.
I hope everyone has heard a theme of our teachers just rising to the occasion. So last, I just wanted to do just a quick whip around. And CJ, we can start with you. Our former Secretary of Education, John B. King Jr., has advocated for a New Deal, raising $1 million, galvanizing a coalition of willing leaders to address systemic racism. If a New Deal for education is what emerges from our experience these last 6 months, what is one approach or element that has to be included? Everybody will get 30 seconds.
All right, I'll try and be brief. I have lots of ideas, but I'm going to start really basic based on what we just discussed. I think there needs to be Wi-Fi for all. Like, why are school districts struggling? Like, we got them the technology, like Pedro, we hustled to make sure that our families had access to technology, and then found out a bunch of them didn't have access to Wi-Fi. And it is literally like water now. It's like, what can you reasonably do without Wi-Fi? So I think that's something that we need to explore. And, as a network of primarily high schoolers, I'm always thinking about our kids and applying to college just in a few months. And, the SAT, for example, I mean, that was something that, kids couldn't take last school year. And we have our class of 2021 in the midst of taking it now. And a lot of colleges and universities are trying to figure out how to adapt to that environment, and have adapted to an environment where students might apply without the SAT. I think these are things we really need to interrogate. It's an important accountability tool, but at the same time, we know that there have been inequities over the course of history as a result of this tool. And it's important that our students have access to a high quality education. So I'll just stop right there because I'm eager to hear other people's ideas as well.
We have 20 seconds left. Very quick, 1 or 2 words. Phyllis, go for it.
I was going to say, we've got to reskill and upskill our educator workforce, invest in our teachers, and pay them more.
Amen. Pedro.
Helping our children learn their history and their identity. So building on what Kaya's work is doing now, educating them about who they are, making them proud of who they are and their culture. That is the number one for me.
All right. And with that, we'll have to close out. But everyone, thank you so much. Continue. I think we've all heard our charge today. We have to continue to press forward, fight these inequities, and do everything that we can to make sure our children have access to the very best, because they deserve it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.